Hey, it's Lack of Lepers. I got a little bit of time, so we're going to do another installment of this Dr. Gears, Shawn Saxum Creative Stuff podcast interview. We'll pick up about where we left off. Let's go.
um, I'm talking back because 682's had a journey. Um, Initially, I had conceived 682 being like the result of a massive cross test or like containment failure, and it was some like hideous mutant thing, which was really stupid. It was bad. I'll level with you. Anyone finds that draft, man, don't. It wasn't any good. It wasn't any good. But it was an interesting idea, and I kind of threw it up there, and people were like, "Dude, this sucks." I'm like, "Yeah, no, it does." Um, but yeah, I kind of cobbled it together and tossed it up there, and then I got the rewrite, and it got a lot better, and I had kind of better ideas. And
Oh, it got a rewrite?
yeah, that was the initial. There was the draft that I did.
Yeah, not a lot of people know this. He might go into this, but a lot of what 682 is known for, like how good it is in the culture, was only half of Dr. Gears doing.
That was crap. And then again, I'm gonna remember his name, tonight when I'm trying to go to bed. But it was in again White Guard's interview.
Epic
He
Fail
mentions the name of the
Spy.
gentleman.
I actually looked at White Guard's interview. I don't think the name was in there either.
No,
I
it's
think
there.
it
Epic
was-
Fail Spy.
It's in the entry about 682. It's somewhere in there.
It's in there.
I know he references. I just can't remember what
Yeah,
it is.
it's Epic
But a guy,
Fail
some
Spy is
rando
the
came in
username.
and edited it up, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a lot better. Thank you so much. Like, yeah, no, it's fine. And I kind of ran with the idea. And one of the things was at the time, the idea of the Foundation focusing on destroying something was unheard of. So it was revolutionary for the time that they were so focused on trying to destroy something. And
Isn't that interesting that this classic conception of something like the GOC, which is more nuanced, obviously, than this, but its entry-level understanding is that it tries to destroy the anomalies that the Foundation would rather contain. And in this way, this note about 682 sort of presages the GOC. It's sort of the first appearance of its mentality that I think we know of.
again, people did. People really did. And it got really bad really fast. People really like it made people angry that like this thing wouldn't die, because I'd be there in the comments sort of slugging it out, with people here and there and different stuff. And it's as I said before, and other people said, 682 is not Kirby. He doesn't take on the property. He finds ways to counter what's there. Sometimes it works out that way, but he finds a way to counter things, and sort of this massive adaptation. And people were so like people got angry, like legitimately very angry. That he
Probably should be said that there's I'm not sure if it's still open or not, but there was a collaborative log that anyone could contribute to of ways that SCP-682 has tried to be killed, and of course the whole idea, every single time it has to fail somehow.
Yeah, and
It's just funny that people were as autistic like I am back in the day when it comes to getting mad about ways that the SCP is going that you don't agree with.
and people get like angry, like
Yeah.
legitimately very very angry.
I know it looks like I get, like, if you read my blog, you would think I'm like this Grinch, this like just old curmudgeon of an individual, a stooge, if you will, Scrooge, if you will, both. But I'm really not. Like, these videos are more really like what I am. I mean, I'd certainly have pointed and what I would consider hard-hitting things to say about the SCP Wiki, but all this comes from a place of enjoyment. I mean, even my highly venomous and critical statements, typically, once again, on my blog, those are done out of a sort of sport. All of my heroes are pit bull sort of like critics who bite and who don't let go. And so, I'm having a great time, honestly. Basically trying to be them when I grow up. So, it seems like I get really, really angry. I don't. I have a good time actually making other people angry. It's typically those individuals who are writing, the SCPs and whose egos are more at stake. I don't really have an ego, I don't think. Certainly not in the community. I'm not really somebody who people at the SCP Wiki or in that community sort of revere, so I don't really have a big bubble to pop in the first place. They do.
About this.
It's always fun.
And like I see threads back on 4chan of people bitching about this lizard, how stupid it was, and how to marry Sue and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, what do you think? What do you think of me? Like, if that's my self-insert, dude, what?
Self-insert 682. Yeah. Man. Yeah.
But
So dumb.
but it
Nice.
was as time went on, I seriously considered like just deleting it occasionally because it was like it made people so angry. It was so divisive.
Yes, DJ Cactus did that. Not to bring him out of the fray again and again, but it's just interesting to see different personalities. You know, a character, by the way, in case you're a writer and you haven't picked up on this yet, a character is someone who will do a certain action when given a certain situation, when presented with a certain set. What differentiates characters from one another, besides like hat tricks, like putting on a accent or something like that, is what they do in a given situation and how it differs from what someone else would do. Their actions really defining who they are. And just with that equipped, it's interesting to look at something like SCP-4911, which was a skip written by DJ Cactus in 2018 and released on September 11th, so 9/11. It was about the 9/11 attacks. It was just a real absolute disaster of an SCP that attempted to play on this. Really is a very strange idea, because SCP Wiki is not a place where you could harvest a lot of patriotism, I don't think, in that way. A lot of, America first, my freedom kind of stuff. But that's kind of what that article was about. And in fact, it really would have pissed off that demographic more, because it converted all of the heroics done by first responders into a Mary Sue, a self-insert, essentially Mary Sue, who did all the work for them as an anomaly, as a skip. And, of course, that was the infamous skip that brought out such a strong reaction in pro-communist, anti-capitalist, anti-America, America last, America death to America, communism will win, or they're also known as Kumioi. And that individual was banned from the SCP Wiki for the venom that they had to spit in response to this SCP-4911. And I've written about that on the blog, of course, too. It's just interesting to see that when you have a real controversial article that really it has a lot of heat attributed to it, and that heat doesn't let up. In one case, you have someone like DJ Cactus who will delete it after just being tired of it. And then you have someone like Dr. Gears, who something that's existed, 10 times as long, almost, give or take. Let's just call it 10 times. Decides not to do it, decides to stick with their initial ideals and convictions when posting something like that. So just, once again, not to bash DJ Cactus personally, just there's a very, very large divide philosophically between someone like DJ Cactus, who I think represents, starting to move away from this, but represents a lot of the worst things about the culture, and someone like Dr. Gears, who is already far away from the culture but represents the best parts of it.
But I ended up keeping it, and kind of the idea developed that, and I've talked about this before, and I think I've referenced it once or twice, that 682 isn't here. 682 comes, basically think of our reality as the outer surface of the balloon, and 682 is poking in from the inside. Now, what we see is the bump. 682 looks like a big, hairy, rotten lizard. Because that's what our reality interprets that bump as.
Interesting way of explaining that. Did y'all enjoy 682? Anybody watching? I never really was a big fan of it, honestly. It just never really spoke to me at all. But this is interesting what he's saying.
Image file through an audio mixer and get something out. It'll be weird and messed up, but it will exist. Right. The same way 682 is existent. But that's kind of not what it is.
Very interesting.
And the other issue is that bump, that layer of rubber, is incredibly, incredibly thick. So as we bash and tear and rip at 682, what we're damaging is the rubber. And that's like if you were pushing against a foot-thick rubber sheet and someone shaved a couple of inches off the outside. That will affect your hand not at all. That does nothing to you. And that's the same thing, is what we're hitting is functionally no worse than a haircut to it. And that's
Wow.
why it is so hard to kill. That's why it is so incredibly hard
Very
to make
interesting.
die, because we're not doing, there's bones flying around on meat,
I love
crushing
this.
all kinds. We're not hurting what it
So this is how you take a simple concept that's like juvenile and elementary and unimpressive and mundane and thin, and you make it THICC.
is. We're just damaging its clothes. We're damaging its hair. We're attacking.
Just by use of fantastic analogy. Very creative thinking going on here.
Things that are inconvenient and unpleasant, but not lethal. And kind of going further from that to a certain extent, 682 goofs with human ambition in a weird way, even though it's not listed in the thing. We have this impulse to understand. It's look at blowfish. Someone ate one and died, and we kept doing that until we figured out how to eat them and not die. You could just not eat it. That's an option. And we as humans have this impulse to climb and uncover and
sometimes it's not an option.
Open and dig and conquer and eat and do all this kind of stuff. And 682 just doesn't. He exists beyond that. And what's more, he's very aggressive and he's very violent. So it causes...
The one thing about 682 that I like is the disgust philosophically that it has for the human species. Not that I share in that, I don't, but I like to repurpose that when I'm disgusted by the cockroaches of SCP Wiki and how they look when I turn the lights on.
Impulse. It's like, we're hurting you. We're hitting you really hard. Die. Effing die. And it drives people up the wall, and it makes people very upset. So in a way, if it is making you angry and frustrated, it's technically working. Mm-hmm. See what I did there?
Yeah, I guess so.
Interesting. We call that dual universality. So when you have something that overlaps effortlessly between the in-universe and out-of-universe. You can also think of those as pataphysical wormholes, which has been explored in a variety of ways that I tried to explore when I wrote for the SCP Wiki, but I don't think I did a very good job of it. Tried to write an article about pataphysical wormholes. A lot of my articles really are about the overlap of phenomena, like sensorial overlap. Really a common theme in mind that I think is a great nidus for the development of anomalies. But it's really interesting when he talks about it this way. The example here being that if you're irritated about SCP-682 out of universe being this infinitely resilient and robust thing that is immune to death, that sort of parallels in universe as well, just as much and to the same extent. And you're sort of performing and demonstrating the point. So that's brilliant when people can do that.
Falling for it.
There it is. The other thing being, he's a beast, and part of it, and I've referenced this before. I know I did an interview, but it's 682 is angry, yes, but also scared, like very, very scared.
Aww.
Imagine everything you touched turned to maggots. Every surface, your clothes, even your skin, maybe, the air, anything would just turn to maggots and spiders and horrible, awful, awful stuff.
It's gross.
That's what he's dealing with. That's what here is to him. He's very, very scared. In the same way that you will scream and crush a cockroach that skitters across the floor, he lashes out. Yes, he's scared, but he's also going to try and make the bad go away. And that is, one of the things is animals and beings of any type, intelligent or not, when they get scared, are incredibly, incredibly dangerous.
It's so funny I think that SCP-5000 is getting a lot of replay value. Its stock is going up as you listen to this, if you're familiar with SCP-5000. I think in a way that's... because SCP-682 is cast in that SCP-5000, and really it's this mentality that he's talking about that sort of is applied, en masse to humanity by the Foundation this time. And I think one of the central observations of that piece is that essentially 682's mentality is unleashed on the world via the Foundation itself. So I think it's interesting to think about SCP-5000 in this. It's partially why I don't appreciate, I kind of reserve some points and praise that I would otherwise give for articles that rely so heavily on other people's works, just because it's a little, it's almost like stolen valor. It's like claiming something that's not really yours. If Dr. Gear is talking about 682 and using his brilliance and his creativity to enrich it, intellectually, SCP-5000's, shining image as a result of that is really just a reflective property. It's not really an intrinsic property to it. It's like a reflection of the sun as opposed to the sun. And so that's why it bothers me. There are people who do that a whole lot, and I don't want to bring up DJ Cactus again, but he's notorious for riding on the coattails of other people's successes to harvest more upvotes.
Ask anybody who's tried to save someone who's drowning. They'll when someone's scared enough, they will not care. They'll do anything to survive, and that's
eating a blowfish. Even
he's sort of stuck here in this hellscape and trying to make something happen.
Very interesting.
Sort of dropping back. That was one of the.
It sounds like 682 would want to die. In this context, die to our reality. So there's got to be a way that the Foundation can collaborate with 682 to have a mutually beneficial thing, a win-win, where everybody gets what they want.
With the acid, is that actually helps sort of chill him out to a certain extent. It's not really hurting him. It's comfortable, if that tells you anything. So maybe an idea of how things are wherever it's from.
Excuse me.
But no, 682 is the death gecko.
A lot of Rule 34.
That's
the death gecko.
682.
I've called him that.
God, man, that must be like the worst feeling. You write something and you find out that someone like put it on Rule 34. Like, not cool, man.
My wife tried to make a stuffed animal of him at one point, and
that's cute.
Still has the idea now and then.
I mean, she should put that on Etsy.
And then 914 is the.
That'd be very
Clockworks,
successful. 914.
The Great Machine.
How much time we got left here?
That was.
Wish we were talking about 914 the whole time.
Kind of idea is.
Before you go on, real quick.
Oh yeah, please, no, excuse me.
Maybe we're about like an hour and 10 minutes in already, so maybe be a little bit brief with the old man and the Clockworks.
Oh fuck! Shit. Now I'm angry. I mean, come on. Someone out there is happy that we spent a lot more time on 682 instead of 914, and to a lesser extent 106 to me. 106 was the first one that I read. I said, there's something to this. And then 914 was the one I read, and I said, oh, there it is.
914 was just basically the idea of doing something that would be almost impossible with modern technology, with old school like clockworks and gears and pistons and stuff like that. And I just kind of put that together. And just literally just kind of throws. And a lot of my items are either things, especially my early stuff, is either stuff I'm scared of or things I think are neat. And this is definitely sort of in the other camp. And it respects.
Thinking things are neat and being afraid, they are twin emotions. They're twin spaces in the mind.
Laws. One of them, conservation of mass. But that's about it. And you put things in and wind it up and watch it go. And
once again, you got simple ingredients, right? 914 is very conceptually thin. We might echo Quantum. It is conceptually thin, but the testing logs still go on to this day. In fact, they're so populated that they've had trouble curating them and had to revamp the entire process by which people submit them. It's a lot harder now to submit anything to the 914 experiment logs because it's just still so ravenous. It's still so popular. So take that, Quantum. You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
That is just the variety of things that it ended up doing. It became such a big thing. The test log became, I think, one of the biggest documents for a long time. And now it's functionally its own wiki.
Yep.
That's kind of its own.
Listen to Dr. Gears, Quantum. The testing logs for 914 are functionally its own wiki. I mean, you have just been incidentally refuted by Dr. Gears. So think before you leap, man. I mean, just think about it for a second. That came from a place. I don't resent you for it. I just know it's easy to see that that came from a place of severe emotional fear, a severe emotional tumultuousness. It didn't come from a place of the sort of thinking that I know quantum is capable of. It's not very representative of that person's intellect. So, anyway, QED. Thanks, Dr. Gears, again.
And 914 was the one of...
It's funny because people don't believe me when I say it, but, it's nice to have Dr. Gears incidentally say the same things, accidentally agree with me. That makes the point much better for these people.
The first item that I really sat down and I wrote something for. And with that, if you haven't read Clockwork Time, please do so. I would really appreciate it. And I've got a lot of good reports on that. But it goes through my interpretation, my idea of where 914 comes from. And,
I don't think I've read that.
What it is. Maybe not why it works the way it does.
Is that in the notes?
But where it comes from. And a lot of people dug it a whole lot, so they thought it was very cool. And check it out if you can. But no, 914 was very much just me being enamored with Clockworks and just kind of, it'd be really cool to like make him do stuff that didn't kill somebody, at least not like ambiently. So that's what I did. That was a revelation at the time. Revolutionary idea, especially for my shit at that time. That was like, wow, that's really cool. And then the Old Man, which is funny because I still think of that as one of my newer ones. Even though it's like, it's old now. But initially, if I remember right, 106 came around because we were trying to think of an idea. It's the idea that every species on Earth has some sort of predator that's suited to hunt them, and humans don't. And it was sort of going off of that idea.
Depends on where you are. I guess maybe he already said this, but suited to hunt you in your element, in your own element. It's probably what he meant.
Mimicking evolution, and so predators a lot of times take on aspects.
Because if you put a human in the ocean, I mean, a shark is, you might as well put an ant on the desk here and, tell it to fend me off.
Prey and vice versa, and things like that. And it was a lot of really good ideas. And man, I didn't.
What was it that toe to toe, humans with a lot of animals don't stand a chance. Bears are particularly frightening. They can do everything you can do better. And that's why you need a 10 millimeter handgun, like a Glock 20, which is what I have, with a capable bear felling cartridge, buffalo bore or something like that. I think it was Colt who said, not all men are created equal. No, God created men and Colt made all men equal. I love that. Same applies for animals.
Together, but then I started putting in what if I really make this bad? Like, what if I really make this like really bad, like straight up check under your bed kind of stuff. And so I started throwing in like bits of serial killer stuff and torture and mental and just awful shit. And just kind of pile all that in there and ended up put it together, and I published it out. Man, people didn't like it.
It's so funny. First of all, that image from 106, I'm sure it's gone by now because it's not CC compliant or whatever bullshit they have going on now. But it was really disturbing to see that individual who was like eaten up. Basically, that was a very disturbing image. One of the first ones I saw from the site. And then the other point before we go wrap up just for this episode, it's interesting to see how many things are disliked when they first come out. This is very common, in art, where you have things that break the mold and cause, riots. The Rite of Spring, is an example that comes to mind. There's so many others where something that's so new, angers people, like what he's talking about, kind of. But only time can tell whether it's actually going to be a revolutionary thing that people get mad over or whether it just actually sucked. This has been Lack of Lepers. Catch you next time. Thanks for joining.